Before you do a single thing today, before you open your phone, before you check the news, before you look in the mirror and start measuring, I need you to stop. Just stop. Because there is something you need to hear first. Something that, if you actually let it in, really let it in, has the power to change everything about how you walk through this day. I know where you are right now. I know the weight you woke up carrying this morning. I know the thing you've been praying about. The thing you've been waiting on. The door that still hasn't opened. The wound that still hasn't closed. The situation that still looks exactly the same as it did last week, last month, maybe even last year. I know that hope is getting harder to hold on to. I know that you've started to wonder, in the quiet moments when nobody's watching, whether anything is actually changing, whether the prayers are reaching anywhere, whether the breakthrough you've been reaching for is actually getting closer, or whether the waiting has just become your permanent address. I hear all of that, and I am not going to dismiss it. I am not going to tell you to just think positive. I am not going to give you a list of 3 steps and send you on your way. What I am going to give you today is something far more specific than that. Here is what I came to tell you. Your healing has already begun. Not is beginning. Not will begin when you get yourself together. Not might begin if you pray the right prayer. Already begun. Past tense. Established fact. Done deal. The healing you have been waiting for, the real healing, the deep healing, the specific healing of the specific wounds you carry. It has not been sitting somewhere waiting to start. It started. And it is happening right now, in this moment, even as these words reach your ears. Stay with me. Because I know what just happened in your mind. I know the part of you that wants to argue with that. The part that says, but I don't feel healed. Nothing has changed. You don't know what I'm dealing with. I do know. And what I want to spend the next 25 minutes doing is showing you why what you cannot feel is still absolutely real. Let me start with the most important thing I can teach you about the nature of healing. Because the reason most people miss the beginning of their healing is not because their healing hasn't started. It's because they're looking for it in the wrong place. They're looking at the surface. And healing does not begin at the surface. Think about this. When a bone breaks, and some of you know exactly what I mean, not just physically, but the kind of break that happens inside, the kind that doesn't show up on any X-ray. When a bone breaks, the body does not wait. The very moment after the break, the healing systems mobilize. Immediately. Not tomorrow. Not when conditions are perfect. Not when you feel ready. Right then. But here's what's important to understand. In those early days after a break, you cannot see the healing happening. In fact, the surface often looks worse before it looks better. The swelling increases. The bruising spreads. The pain can intensify. Because the inflammatory response that is part of the healing process has gotten underway. The body is doing the most critical work at the cellular level, in the foundations, in the invisible, and the surface has not caught up yet. That is where you are. You are in the inflammatory stage, the stage where the surface looks the same or even harder, the stage where the pain is present and real. But underneath what you can see and feel, the healing systems are already working. The foundations are already being addressed. The deep structural repair has already begun. This is not a metaphor. This is the actual design of how healing works. Every kind of healing follows this same pattern. The beginning of healing happens at the deepest available level, at the root, at the foundation, in the invisible, and it works its way up and outward through the layers until eventually the surface begins to show what has been happening underneath it all along. The visible evidence is not the beginning. The visible evidence is the arrival of what began long before it was seen, and the evidence of your healing is coming. But first let me show you why the invisible phase is not just normal, it is absolutely necessary. There are 4 reasons why healing begins before it is felt, and I want you to understand all 4 of them, because together they form a complete picture of what is happening in you right now. The first reason: the deepest wounds require the deepest healing. And deep healing must begin at the level where the wound actually lives. Some of you are not carrying surface wounds. You are carrying wounds that go all the way down, into the belief systems you formed as a child, into the stories you were told about who you are and what you're worth, into the nervous system that learned to brace for impact and never fully learned how to stand down, into the places where your trust, in yourself, in others, in God, was broken. Those wounds are not at the surface, and healing that starts at the surface cannot reach them. The healing you need starts at the root, and the root is underground. The root is invisible. The root is exactly where your healing is working right now. The second reason: some of what the healing requires to accomplish cannot be accomplished while it is being observed. Think about a seed. A seed germinates in the dark, in the soil, underground, out of sight. If the farmer digs up that seed every few days to check on its progress, to see if anything is happening, to measure how far it has come, to evaluate whether the process is working, do you know what happens? The germination is interrupted. The seed needs the dark. It needs the soil. It needs the uninterrupted quiet of the process to do what it is designed to do. And only after the root system is established underground does the shoot break the surface. Some of you have been digging up your seed. You've been in a constant cycle of checking for evidence, looking for signs of change, measuring the distance between where you are and where you want to be, trying to evaluate whether healing is actually happening. And I understand why. I understand the exhaustion of the wait. I understand the desperate need to see something. But here's the truth. That constant digging up is not neutral. It costs you energy that the healing needs. It introduces a level of anxiety into the environment that is not the most supportive soil for what is already in motion. I am asking you to do something profoundly difficult. I am asking you to trust the dark, to trust the soil, to trust the process you cannot see. Because the seed is already in the ground, and the root system is already forming, and the moment when it breaks the surface is closer than you think. Now I want to get specific, because I am not here to give you beautiful language that doesn't connect to anything real in your actual life. I want to show you what is happening, specifically, in the invisible dimensions of your healing right now. Because when you can name what is happening, even what you cannot feel, it becomes easier to trust it. First, the invisible healing of your mind. Your mind is one of the most complex systems in the known universe. And for many of you, the wound that you need healed is, at its core, a wound in your mind. Not because you're weak, not because something is wrong with you, but because the experiences you have walked through have left their mark on the way you think, the way you interpret what happens to you, the stories your mind automatically tells when something triggers the old pain. The healing of a mind that has been shaped by hard experience happens at multiple levels simultaneously. At the neurological level, the actual physical structures of the brain are being reorganized in response to new input. At the level of your belief system, deeply held convictions that are not consistent with the truth about you are being slowly, gradually loosened. At the level of how you interpret experience, the lens through which you see life is being carefully, incrementally clarified. You cannot feel any of this happening. You do not feel your neurons forming new pathways. You do not feel the moment when a belief that has held you captive begins to lose its grip. These things happen below the surface, in the background, over time. And then one day, Something happens that would have previously sent you into a spiral, and it doesn't. Or you catch a thought that would normally have taken you to a dark place, and something in you says, no, that's not actually true, and you choose differently. That moment is not the beginning of your healing. That moment is the surface expression of healing that has been happening in the invisible for longer than you know. The invisible healing of your mind is already underway. The rewiring is already in progress. The clarification is already happening. And the first time you notice something different, that moment is coming. Second, the invisible healing of your emotions. This is the one that trips people up the most. Because people assume that if their emotions are still painful, no healing is taking place. But that is not how emotional healing works. Emotional healing does not begin with the painful emotion going away. It begins with something that happens underneath the emotion, with the readjustment of the emotional system's baseline, with the slow process of addressing the wound that is generating the painful emotion in the first place. The grief is still there. The fear is still there. The shame may still arrive with its full force. But underneath the surface experience of those emotions, the root system that feeds them is already being addressed. And at some point in this invisible process, something shifts. A trigger fires. But the response is slightly different. Slightly less overwhelming. Slightly shorter in duration. Slightly more manageable than it used to be. That shift is the first visible sign of emotional healing that has been in progress in the invisible. You are closer to that shift than you think. Third, the invisible healing of your body. For those of you carrying physical pain, chronic illness, the physiological effects of years of stress, trauma stored in the body, I want you to hear this clearly. The body is a remarkable healing machine. The cellular repair, the immune system responses, the neurological reorganization, the gradual restoration of systems disrupted by long-term stress. All of these processes are happening constantly, and most of them happen entirely below the threshold of what you can feel. The body heals in the background of experience, the felt improvement, the noticed restoration. It comes after a significant amount of invisible repair work has already been completed. Your body is already working on your behalf. The healing systems are already mobilized. Fourth, the invisible healing of your spirit. This is perhaps the most invisible of all. The healing of the places inside you where trust was broken, where faith became fragile, where the connection between you and God was disrupted by experiences that challenged its very foundation. The spirit heals in the quiet, in the stillness, in the moments between the striving when you simply allow yourself to be held. And the healing of the spirit does not announce itself. It happens in the way you slowly, over time, find it a little easier to believe, a little easier to rest, a little easier to let go of what you've been white-knuckling and trust it to hands bigger than yours. That ease, when it comes, is not the beginning of your healing. It is the evidence of what has already been at work in you. I told you there were 4 reasons why healing begins before it is felt. I gave you the first 2 earlier. Let me give you the third and fourth now, because these 2 are personal. These 2 are about you specifically. The third reason, the feeling of healing is itself part of the healing, and it arrives in its right sequence. The healing of deep emotional wounds does not work by first resolving the pain, and then producing the feeling of resolution. It works by doing deep interior work that eventually produces a felt shift. A moment when something that has been tight begins to loosen. When something that has been closed begins to open. When the thing you've been carrying begins to feel different, lighter, less like a life sentence, more like something you passed through rather than something that defines you. That felt shift is coming. It is part of the healing. It has been included in the process. It has not been forgotten. But it comes after the invisible work has been sufficiently established. And the invisible work is what is currently in progress. The fourth reason, and this one is the one I want you to sit with the longest. Some of what the healing is building in you requires the building to happen in the dark in order to be genuinely yours when it arrives. Think about that. If the healing were immediately visible and immediately felt, if the change came the moment you asked for it, there is a kind of passivity that becomes possible. The passivity of simply receiving the change without the interior work of choosing to believe in its absence. But the trust that is built in the gap, the trust that is exercised in the dark, in the waiting, in the sustained choosing to believe that what cannot be felt is nonetheless real. That trust becomes something. It becomes a deep internal resource. It becomes a part of who you are that you could not have gotten any other way. The shortcut would have bypassed the building, and what is being built in you right now, in this season, in this waiting, in this invisible time, is something that will hold you up in every hard season that comes after this one. You are not just being healed, you are being built. And the building requires exactly this. The time in the dark, the trust in the invisible, the choice to believe when the evidence is thin. That is not weakness. That is the hardest and the most valuable work a human being can do. And you are doing it. Now I want to give you something practical, because I don't want you to leave today still feeling completely blind to what is happening in you. There are early signs of invisible healing. They are subtle. You may have dismissed them, but they are real. Let me give you some of them. The first sign, you are still here. I know that sounds simple, but I need you to understand the significance of it. The fact that you have kept going, through the waiting, through the pain, through the moments when hope was nearly gone, that is not nothing. That is evidence of something working in you, a resilience that does not come from nowhere, a sustaining that you did not manufacture yourself. You are still here. That is the first sign. The second sign, the question has shifted. Many of you started this season asking, why is this happening to me? And somewhere along the way, you noticed the question changing, not to a place of denial, but to something more like, what am I learning here? What is being built? That shift in question is not accidental. It is the first evidence of the mind beginning to reframe, the first sign of the interpretive lens beginning to clarify. If that shift has happened, even slightly, that is a sign. The third sign, there are moments, however brief, of unexpected peace. Moments when, in the middle of circumstances that haven't changed, you felt something settle, something quiet, something that didn't make rational sense given what you're walking through. Those moments are not accidents. They are previews. They are the surface beginning to reflect what has been happening underneath. Pay attention to those moments. They are signs. The fourth sign, your relationship with the pain has shifted slightly. It is still there. It is still real. But something about how you carry it has changed. You have learned things about yourself in this season that you did not know before. You have discovered a strength you weren't sure you had. You have found that you can hold hard things and still function, still love, still believe. That is not nothing. That is evidence of interior work that has already happened. These are not the full healing. These are the early signs. The early signs that the healing which has been in progress in the invisible is beginning, just beginning, to break the surface. Like the first green shoot after a long winter. Small, easy to miss, but absolutely real. And where there is one shoot, the full spring is coming. Now I want to speak directly to your specific situation. If you have been waiting for healing in your body, hear this. The body that feels like it has failed you is already doing everything it knows how to do to restore itself. The healing systems placed inside your physical frame are mobilized. They are working. The improvement that is coming is already being built in the cells. Hold on. If you have been waiting for healing in your mind, hear this. The thoughts that have tormented you, the patterns that have kept you trapped, the beliefs that have made you small, they are already being loosened. The grip is already weakening. The rewiring is already in progress. The day is coming when you will think a thought and realize the old voice has grown quiet. Hold on. If you have been waiting for healing in your heart, for the grief to lift, for the fear to recede, for the shame to stop having the final word, hear this. The grief, the fear, the shame, they are real. I am not dismissing them, but the root system that feeds them is already being addressed. The wound beneath the wound is already being touched. The morning when you wake up and something feels lighter is already on its way to you. Hold on. If you have been waiting for healing in your faith, for the ability to trust again, to believe again, to feel the presence that has seemed so far away, hear this. The distance you feel is not the actual distance. I have not moved. The quiet is not abandonment. The hiddenness is not absence. I am in this with you. I was here when the wound happened. I am here now while the healing is underway. And I will be here when the evidence finally breaks the surface. Hold on. I want to leave you with this. You are not at the beginning of a process that hasn't started. You are in the middle of a process that is already underway. The beginning already happened. You just couldn't feel it. The healing has been in motion while you were waiting for it to begin. While you were measuring the distance. While you were wondering if the prayers were reaching anywhere. They were reaching. They are reaching. Something is moving on your behalf. The dark before the dawn is not the absence of morning. It is the last moments before it arrives. And you are in those last moments. Not at the beginning of the night. At the edge of the morning. The bone is knitting together in the invisible. The seed is putting down roots underground. The dawn is moving toward you. And I, the one who put this healing in motion, I am sustaining it. I am carrying it through. I am not going to leave it unfinished. What I have started in you, I will complete. That is not a maybe. That is not a hope. That is a declaration. So here is what I am asking you to do today. Just today. Not forever. Not for the rest of the process. Just today. Lay down the measuring. Lay down the constant checking for evidence. Lay down the exhausting work of trying to determine whether anything is happening. And rest. Rest in the knowledge that the work is already underway. Rest in the trust that what cannot be seen is nonetheless real. Rest in the fact that you are held by hands that are stronger than the weight you are carrying, and those hands are not letting go. Your healing has already begun, not is beginning, not will begin, already begun. And the evidence is coming, and you are going to see it. And when you do, you will understand why the invisible time was necessary. You will understand what was being built in the dark. You will understand that not a single day of the waiting was wasted. Hold on. The morning is almost here.